I should have never married an hag like you. Younger women are definitely better. I'm embarrassed to be seen with an old lady like you. If I could, I'd go back in time and redo my life."
These were the words spoken to me 10 years ago by my ex-husband, Bob. I'm Katherine Johnson, 48 years old. I married Bob, who was 5 years younger, when I was 33. I was a nurse, and I met Bob at the hospital where I worked. He came to the hospital as a new doctor. He has just finished his medical resident and asked me about various things. Bob's inexperience and reliance on me seemed endearing, and I found myself wanting to support him. But I was a nurse, he was a doctor, and he was 5 years older. I had no idea to dating. But as he kept talking to me daily, I couldn't ignore him, and we naturally started dating. I was a bit concerned about our age difference, but he didn't seem to mind, so eventually, I didn't either. And so, after dating for 2 years, we got married. But 5 years after our marriage, he started to constantly say hurtful things like, I should have married a younger woman. At the hospital, he was noticeably having fun chatting with the younger nurses, but I tried to ignore it. Even if I made a blur in such a place, I just could be miserable. Then one day, I found out about Bob's affair. The mistress was his former patient, someone I had never met, as she was from a different department. She was 10 years younger than me.
"I can't expect to have kids with an old lady like you. She is pregnant with my child."
What? He said with a laugh, as if his affair was perfectly justified. I didn't want to be with such a man anymore, so I accepted divorce. When I told him I'd be seeking alimony, he was furious.
"I've been married to an old hag like you for 5 years. You talking about alimony? I should be the one getting paid."
He talked fast and furious more than expected. He seems that he never thought he would be charged for an alimony even though he had an affair. Bob's father reached out to me. He excused his son's actions, saying, "It's natural for a young man to have an affair with a younger woman," completely ignoring his son's fault. Bob insisted that he wouldn't pay for anything, so I decided to consult with a lawyer. I had been insulted and cheated on, so I couldn't just be silent. The lawyer agreed that seeking alimony was my right, and I decided to leave all the procedure to them. It's often said that divorce is harder than marriage, and I found that to be true. Thanks to the lawyer, I got the alimony and moved out of the apartment which we shared, and I started my life as a single woman. I changed my last name back to my maiden name, Martin, from my married name, Miller. Thankfully, Bob was transferred to another hospital.
"I don't need a hospital with a greedy old hag like you."
He sneered when he left. He probably thought marrying his mistress immediately after our divorce would look bad. I was impressed that he already found the next workplace. But as they say, you can't shut people's mouths. Rumors about me being dumped by Bob for cheating spread, and I felt everyone's eyes on me. Eventually, the suspicion and gossip took a toll on my mental health, and I resigned from the hospital. After spending some time idly, I realized that, as someone who loves working and staying active, just sitting around was making me feel down, so I started looking for a new job. Luckily, I found a nursing position, at a small maternity clinic just 2 stops away by train. It was a small team, but it was a warm, friendly place where I could easily interact with patients.
Martin, you're really attentive and the patients speak highly of you. The director of the hospital is pleased to have you.
Thank you. But my peace didn't last long. That's when a pregnant woman, referred from another hospital, came in, and I was surprised to hear her name. Suzanne Miller, the same name as Bob's mistress. I thought it could be the same name and confirm it. Her husband's name was Bob Miller, a doctor, and indeed, he was my ex-husband. There was no maternity department at the hospital where Bob worked, and she had recently moved nearby, being referred to this hospital by her previous one. I had returned to my maiden name after the divorce, and although we knew each other's names, we had never met face to face. It seemed she hadn't realized who I was either. But I never imagined I'd encounter her here. What to do? I hesitated to tell anyone she was Bob's mistress. Days passed without me being able to say anything. Then one day, Bob came for a checkup with his wife.
What?
Bob's eyes widened in surprise upon seeing me. He must not have expected to find me here. I didn't want to see him again, either.
What are you doing here?
He asked, and his wife seemed to realize who I am.
This person. Maybe.
You came to this hospital just to harass us.
That's ridiculous. I was here before you. There was no way I could have known Bob lived near this hospital. But Bob wouldn't listen, accusing me of following them around to harass him.
You're following me to harass me, aren't you?
Don't be silly. Why would I do that?
You're a greedy woman who took my money after being dumped for being old. I don't trust you.
He shouted in the examination room, making our relationship known to everyone around. I felt everyone's judgmental stares, even though Bob was clearly in the wrong. Well, I'm scared. Ever since I came here, I felt she's been giving me mean looks. What if she does something to my baby? His wife added dramatically, tearing up. Keep her away from my wife. She might do something, Bob said, and the attending doctor asked me to leave the examination room. It wasn't that they doubted me, but it was the only way to defuse the situation. I understand that patients come first. I didn't even want to be there. But I felt miserable. Now everyone knew about my divorce, and I became conscious of their stares. In addition, Bob's wife keeps going here and says my bad word every time she comes. Even though everyone knows that I'm not bad, the other person is a patient. Moreover, an important body that gives birth to a baby. No one could say anything, caught between not wanting to upset her and avoiding personal involvement. My work environment became unbearable. There were still over 6 months until her delivery. I couldn't endure such a tense atmosphere for that long. It was a good workplace, but I submitted my resignation.
I'm sorry, but it can't be helped.
It seemed that the director's face was relieved somehow. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I wondered why I had to suffer like this. Exhausted by everything, I couldn't bring myself to look for another hospital job and returned to my parents' home in the countryside. They welcomed me without saying much. I felt guilty doing nothing, so I started working part-time at a nearby supermarket. It was refreshing and a change of pace from my nursing job. I liked the job of a nurse and felt worthwhile, but I still had no day to be careful because I was not odd for the workplace for people's lives and the sense of responsibility. The supermarket job was a welcome relief. I didn't want to worry my aging parents and tried to handle things alone, but looking back, I wish I had returned home sooner. 3 years later, the supermarket offered me a full-time position. I was recognized for my hard work and happily accepted the offer. 4 years after that, a matchmaking opportunity came up.
Would you be interested in going on a blind date?
What?
There's someone who might be just right for you.
The department manager from our main store brought it. At that time, I was 45 and had no intention of remarrying, so I planned to politely decline, but the manager was insistent. The man was 47, like me, and also divorced due to his spouse's infidelity. The cause of the divorce was a flirtation of the spouse, like me. It had been 20 years since his divorce. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him. Given our age, we decided to meet directly without an intermediary. When I arrived at the designated restaurant, he was already there. As I entered the room, he suddenly stood up, bowed deeply, and accidentally hit his forehead on the table.
Ouch.
He raised his face, now flushed red. I couldn't help but laugh at the scene, which seemed straight out of a comic.
I'm Michael Johnson. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, hi, I'm Catherine Martin. Thanks to the first accident, it didn't take much time to get to know. He explained that he had fallen for me at first sight during a business trip when he visited our supermarket. He had pleaded to set up this meeting. In fact, the director of the head office seems to be a senior at his university.
I'd like to pursue a serious relationship, if possible.
I had come with the intention to refuse, but found myself unable to say those words. In fact, I realized I wanted to see him again. After 6 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents really liked his character and were genuinely happy for us. I was really happy to live with my husband, who always takes care of me. Given our age, we didn't plan on having children. However, when I turned 48, I fell ill. A visit to the doctor revealed a surprise. I was pregnant. I had never imagined I could get pregnant at this age, nor did I think my illness was actually morning sickness. Michael must have felt the same. It looks like there is a baby, I said naturally. He replied, "That's great news. Who's the lucky couple? Do I know them?" "Yes, you know them very well. They're right in front of you."
What?
"I'm pregnant." Michael looked bewildered and fell silent for a while. "Well, that's to be expected," I thought to myself. He then looked at my stomach.
Our baby.
When I nod, my husband turns further. He was probably overwhelmed by the unexpected news. I had ended up in that situation myself.
So, you mean we're going to be parents?
It seems so.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Her husband hugged me, making a crazy voice that wasn't like a husband.
I can't believe it. It's a miracle.
Is it okay to give birth? I had no idea that I wouldn't give birth at the beginning, but I was not that age. I was understandably anxious about the future. At the hospital, even the doctors had asked, "What are you going to do?" I was well aware of the risks associated with having a child at an older age, both for the mother and the baby. Not everyone around me was supportive. Some even questioned, "Do you realize how old you'll be when the child turns 20? The fear of not being able to raise a child at this age was also there. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to end a life that had just begun.
What are you saying? Of course, we're keeping it.
I was so relieved when Michael immediately responded that way. I thought that was my husband's obedient feeling. But as he calmed down, he began to worry about my health. Even for a man, it's easy to imagine the various complications that can arise. After much discussion and agreement between us, and consultations with the doctor, we decided to go ahead with the pregnancy. Both my parents and his were surprised and worried, but ultimately very happy for us. We decided to have the baby at a well-equipped major hospital. The obstetrics teacher was very friendly and was encouraging. On the day of one of my checkups, which was also attended by an internist for precaution, I entered the examination room alone, as Michael had an unavoidable work commitment. I was surprised when I entered. There was my ex-husband, Bob, in the room. Honestly, I couldn't believe I ran into him here again.
Really? A 48-year-old pregnant woman is you? That's unbelievable at your age.
Bob burst out laughing. The obstetrician and nurse did not understand his reaction, but he seemed unconcerned. "You have no right to say that to me."
I'm just concerned. An old lady pregnant. That's just gross.
Is that how you speak to a patient? I can't believe you would say such a thing to a pregnant woman already dealing with anxiety. Are you even a doctor?
What are you getting so high and mighty about? You do realize most of the patients here are wealthy, right? You'd better leave before you embarrass yourself.
Dr. Bob, wait a minute.
I will do so. It's ridiculous to give birth at a hospital with a doctor like you.
Good, leave now.
Dr. Bob, you should know this lady is the wife of a member of the wealthy Johnson family who has donated generously to our hospital.
What?
You might not have known since you're new here.
You're kidding, but she's my ex.
You and I are nothing to each other.
Still, what you just said is inexcusable. It doesn't sound like something a doctor should say.
Oh, I am.
Bob was turning pale when Michael arrived.
Sorry for being late. I'm grateful for how you've been looking after my wife.
He sensed something was wrong from the tense atmosphere.
What happened?
Dr. Bob here was just saying how disgusting it is for a 48-year-old to be pregnant.
What?
Hearing this, Michael's usually calm expression changed instantly. And when I mentioned Dr. Miller, he must have realized that this man was my ex-husband. I had told Michael about my previous marriage, and he knew Bob's name and profession.
So, you're Dr. Bob. You've been insulting my wife.
Well, I mean.
Insulting a patient? What kind of hospital is this? I can't entrust my precious wife and inborn child to such a place.
As Michael finished speaking, the nurse who had left earlier returned, this time with the hospital director.
Johnson, I heard there was some discourtesy.
Director,
We chose this hospital thinking it was reliable, based on my father, Jack's recommendation. I didn't expect such a doctor to be here. It seems we made a mistake in our choice.
I apologize profusely. It's not like that. This man is not one of our doctors.
what?
I've just fired him.
Director, what are you saying?
I didn't know he was like this. I only hired him because an acquaintance asked me to. We don't need a doctor who speaks so rudely to patients. He won't bother you again.
Wait, Director, what are you talking about?
Shut up. You leave here now. Don't get close to our hospital again.
After hearing the director's words, Bob shouted, "I don't want to go out. I don't want to go." The director apologized profusely, looking really sorry, so we decided to stay and talk. Michael, still angry, asked, "Did you fire him because my father, Jack, donated to this hospital? Would you have let him stay if that wasn't the case?" The director shook his head vehemently. It turned out Bob had only been at this hospital for a week. Mike is a classmate of the director, had begged for his son's employment during a recent reunion. "I never thought he was such a person," the director said regretfully. "Not all doctors here are like Bob. Our obstetrician, for instance, is excellent." I said I still wanted to give birth here if Bob was gone, and Michael agreed. Jack, the CEO of a major corporation with branches nationwide, donates part of his profits to medical and welfare facilities. This hospital received a substantial donation because my ML had been treated here for a serious illness when she was young. That's why Jack recommended this hospital for my delivery. A few days later, Bob called, begging me to persuade the director to rehire him.
If you ask, maybe something can be done.
Apparently, he had often angered patients with his arrogant attitude and had been moving from one hospital to another. It's unbelievable how someone can repeat the same mistake so often. The ex-Phil said, "If you lose the next job, there is no future for you." Nevertheless, it is no wonder that the sweetness of the ex-Phil may have made Bob such a man. When the phone was called, my husband was with me. My husband picked up the phone from me, and if he shouted at Bob, "I'll contact the police immediately with a nuisance if you contact me again, or get close to me," there was no call after that. Sometime later, I saw Bob working at a convenience store. Apparently, no hospital would hire him anymore. He was crying, saying his wife and child had left him, but I felt no sympathy. I decided to avoid that convenience store in the future. The following year, I safely gave birth to a girl. She's a beautiful and healthy baby girl. No matter what, no matter how hard it is, I have decided that I will take care of her with responsibility. However, the husband mellowed to the child from the moment of birth. He seems to be becoming a very doting father, so I have to be careful.